A very good morning and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. Welcome to today's Hindu News Analysis, where we shall be taking up important articles from the Hindu newspaper for today, that is 5th April 2024, from the Hindu New Delhi edition. So here we have a collection of 6 articles that have been picked up respectively from the perspective of UPSC Mains, 3 articles that need a detailed analysis that range from what changes are needed in the Indian higher education system. Specifically, we shall talk about the controversy regarding more autonomy that needs to be given to Indian colleges. From there, we shall talk about the 3 new controversial and ambiguous changes that have been made to the IPC in the form of Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. What are these new changes and why are they a matter of controversy? The last article for mains talks about how the government has made it important to record religion of both parents when it comes to registering the birth of a child. And then we have 3 articles that we shall take up for being factual and crisp. So they are important from prelims perspective. Here we are going to talk about how the US has made it very clear that it is not imposing any sanctions on India for importing oil from Russia. And if at all, the EU and US had been insisting on countries from refraining against any kind of oil and gas import from Russia, that was for a reason. That was not to disable energy self-sufficiency of countries. From there, we'll talk about the South China Sea situation very often in the news, and lately, what has Philippines been doing to combat Chinese aggression. And the last article for the day, we'll talk about AMR, antimicrobial resistance. Now, something that is making a buzz around the global healthcare segment. In fact, we often talk about WHO and the upcoming threat of disease X. So what is this AMR and what does the future look like? These are certain articles for the day. And now let's proceed with the very first article from mains perspective, which has been picked up from page 8 The Hindu today. The article talks about how universities should think about giving a complete autonomy, independence, freedom to colleges when it comes to taking decisions on their curriculum, their pedagogical practices, and their internal management. This autonomy is important to inculcate innovation in India's higher education system, because until and unless various colleges across different specializations achieve some internal autonomy, unless they have a right to make decisions, they shall never be able to provide an innovative, creative, and learning-oriented atmosphere for the students. So the article touches upon a mandate that has been created by the National Education Policy 2020. Now, we might be aware that the NEP 2020 is India's third and only such unique education policy that talks about a range of changes that are desperately needed in India's education system. So on the one hand, we talk about vocational education. On the other hand, we talk about inculcating more learning options in vernacular languages. We do talk about creating a system of examination that is based on quality learning and not rote learning. Plus, we also talk about smart, digital, AI-oriented learning. And one such change, in fact, that has been introduced by the NEP 2020 is that colleges should now emerge as autonomous institutions, which will eventually improve their capacity for self-governance, innovation, and academic freedom. So the University Grants Commission, encouraged by this mandate of NEP 2020, had also made one such initiative back in 2023. The problem is, although UGC has clarified that colleges will now, upon requesting, be allowed to manage their internal affairs independently. But despite that, even today, there is a lot of interference of university into various colleges. It has resulted in a lack of implementation of this critical mandate of NEP. Now, very interestingly, ever since this issue was raised, about more than 550 applications were submitted by various colleges across the country to the UGC. They all want autonomy. So the article then talks about what are certain benefits of allowing this kind of internal freedom to colleges. The biggest benefit is that unless the college management is responsible for creating, improving, changing and revising, updating the curriculum, institutional excellence will not be possible. Now let's remember that India is also geographically a very, very varied country, and therefore we also talk about the linguistic cultural variations here. Colleges across various states might have their own unique needs when it comes to providing curriculum in certain languages. Now, the issue regarding foreign languages being taught in colleges, issues regarding state history, cultural heritage being taught in colleges, now these will always remain ambiguous until the college authorities have a right to take decisions regarding what to be included and what to be excluded from the curriculum. That's one benefit. It improves quality. It is a kind of customized learning outcome that we can achieve. Second biggest benefit is that if colleges are allowed to create their own customized curriculum, they can also take a call on whether this can be provided in a flipped format. By flipped format we mean, can it be provided both online and offline? Now when we talk about certain remote areas of the country, specifically the northeast and the Himalayan territories, we know that most students have a problem in accessing infrastructure, college infrastructure. In this case, an online attendance could do wonders for improving academic outcomes. So this decision should be left to the college. Apart from that, if we allow colleges to tailor or create their own curriculum, the colleges can then also take care of students with varied learning needs. For example, if colleges are given freedom, probably students could be provided with much better industrial training, which would result in a much better employability of these students in the market tomorrow. Another benefit is that social development could be promoted highly when teaching methodologies and research initiatives are allowed to be experimented with. Now, with the conventional format of learning, there are certain claims that Indian universities do not offer much scope for research and innovation. R&D is acutely missing in higher institutions. So this problem again can be circumvented if we allow colleges to take a call on how much research and how much innovation is possible across unique, diverse issues. For example, social development. Now, social development again is a very, very subjective issue in India, given that every state has its different level of socio-economic development. And hence, better social welfare courses, better social issues training could also take care of this problem. Now, autonomy also therefore makes the college management more responsible. For example, we often say that colleges should be a place where there is absolute gender neutrality. There are sensitive issues being raked up. For example, dress code in colleges. We could also talk about the food that is being allowed in the college canteens. Again, these can be best understood by the local college management, and hence it would lead to a much better satisfaction and responsibility on the part of staff and management of the college if they are given the right to make their own administrative decisions. The article also says that this empowerment on the colleges, if we provide them with such autonomy, with minimal interference from university, it could also allow the colleges to conduct examination at their own ease, which means that the examinations could be further broken down into, say, triannual or 3 times a year assessment or weekly assessment, online assessment, assessments where students' true skills are put to test rather than having a very rote learning environment. And apart from that, it will also motivate the faculty to further enhance their outputs. Now, recently we were also talking about National Mentoring Initiative, where the NICTE has been talking about providing training to teachers so that they can become better mentors. Similarly, college teachers who are dealing with state-of-the-art pedagogy, they could also get better options of self-development and better learning, better skill enhancement if the college takes responsibility of designing its own curriculum and methodology and examination. However, there is another point that the article makes, that it is not just a theory, but there is a practical proof of how autonomy does wonders to higher education. For example, the National Institutional Ranking Framework, the NIRF, that was in fact released by the Ministry of Education back in 2023. Here, under a specific category called as the college category, 55 out of the topmost 100 colleges of India are already autonomous institutions. This is a proof enough that the top-notch colleges have been able to become centers of excellence only because they were allowed this autonomy. Similarly, in the top 10 colleges also, this ranking of 2023 shows that 5 of the cream de la cream, the top best 5 colleges, are again completely autonomous. So which means that if the top spots are often grabbed by autonomous institutions, the article then says it talks volumes about the necessity of extending this autonomy to many more colleges existing within the country. So therefore, higher education in India again is witnessing a massive rise. We know that in the last few years, despite the COVID pandemic, despite constant recessions that have been hitting the market, a very interesting development has been a better enrollment ratio in primary and secondary schools. Now, a clear offshoot of that is that even in the higher education segment, the number of colleges are expected to improve, to increase up to about 1,000 across 24 states and UTs in India. So with this kind of expanding infrastructure, it is the need of the hour that universities allow some space to these colleges to take their own decisions. Further, the article also say that, fine, even if the universities agree and colleges are given autonomy and independence, could there be certain problems associated with that too that need to be thought of well before? Well, yes, certain problems are there, but highlighted by the article. It says that sometimes, even when universities agree to give autonomy to the colleges, one problem is they are putting too much restriction by allowing only 25 to 35% of syllabus change. The remaining 70% part of the syllabus has to be as per the guidelines of university. Again, which means it's a very partial freedom that we are giving them. Similarly, despite autonomy, colleges are often experiencing a delay in getting their demand met. For example, they make an application for autonomy and the UGC agrees. But by the time the autonomy is finally granted, years pass into that. Again, this is a wastage of quality time. Because let's remember, every academic year we are churning up thousands of students who will tomorrow be the workforce of the country. So any delay could also mean a devastation. Any delay could mean a ruining of the potential that we have of youth who will be employable soon in the market. Similarly, even after UGC is giving a complete autonomy, the problem is that in certain areas such as changing of curriculum, in certain areas such as introducing new courses, introducing new learning material, and new kind of testing evaluation systems, UGC often has a reservation to that. It often creates objections to that, which means there is autonomy, but not completely. It's a very sparse autonomy that we are talking about today. Sometimes arbitrary fees are imposed on these colleges by the University Grants Commission, and the colleges then have no right to change, to reduce or increase the kind of fee structure. If colleges need affiliation, they have to abide by the rules made by UGC. Again, that's not fair, because sometimes excellence suffers when certain courses are provided at a subsidized cost. Similarly, there are certain other courses that should be subsidized and yet they are charged on a higher rate. So it's very arbitrary, and that is something we need to talk about. So therefore, the article clearly says that the state councils for higher education has to work hard. They have to make sure across various states that better implementation regarding autonomy takes place so that we can further provide a shot in the arm to India's higher education system. With that, we'll proceed with the second article here that has been again picked up from page number 8. It corresponds to polity. It says that there are certain changes that were made by the Indian government in 2023 to the IPC, the Indian Penal Code. The purpose was to overhaul India's criminal justice system, which has been constantly living in a kind of hangover of colonial era. So all the laws that we are talking about in IPC, technically they are now very redundant because they have been operational from the British times. So today the government feels there is a need to improve, there is a need to overhaul these laws, and this need comes in the form of 3 critical changes that have been made under the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023. So the article talks about what are these 3 laws that have been changed, but what are the problems with these? So now recently the government has announced 1st July 2024 as the date from which all these amendments will be implemented. So the article argues that before the date arrives and before they are implemented, please stop and give a second thought, because certain changes are very ambiguous and they are not solving any good purpose. This is the critical argument of the article. So let's understand that back in 2023 itself, the Parliament passed 3 new criminal laws that were to replace the age-old colonial IPC laws, right? With the purpose of reinvigorating and re-energizing India's criminal justice system. These 3 laws were Bharatiya Nyaya Second Sanhita, Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita, as well as Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam, which is Proof or Evidence Act. All these 3 were there to replace respectively the IPC 1860, the Code of Criminal Procedure 1898, as well as the Indian Evidence Act 1972 respectively. So these therefore now have been announced that they shall be implemented from 1st July 2024 onwards, except for a particular section, that is section 106 subclause 2. This has been put on a hold. This has been put on a hold because it deals about certain accidental situations in the case of fatal accidents where victim dies or gets critically injured. In that case, a mandate has been created where the person who has caused the accident must ensure some kind of medical or some kind of legal attention to the victim. And if the person fails to do that and escapes the scene of the accident, then he or she shall be liable to severe punishment. Now, this law has been therefore protested a lot by a wing of India's transport drivers, particularly the truck driving segment and the bus driving segment. And hence it has been, as of now, put on the hold. The government will think about it again because it is proving to be too harsh as per what people believe. But apart from that, the other amendments are now set to be put in place. But this article says that there are 3 specific laws here that have been encapsulated under this new Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita that demand, in fact, that should need some kind of reassessment. They are not doing any good. So what are these? The first one, as we talk about, which has been put on a hold, is again section 106 clause 2. This says that the punishment for people who are involved in fatal or deadly accidents and who fail to take any action to protect the victim of the accident will be liable for a 10 years imprisonment if they escape without reporting the accident to the police or to the district magistrate. So there are concerns regarding how fair is this kind of a punishment. There is also a concern that it almost is unconstitutional because a certain provision of the Constitution under Article 20 Clause 3 says that individuals in India, Indian citizens have a right against self-incrimination. You will not be forced to incriminate yourself or to report yourself. So you have a protection against that. It is a constitutional mandate. It's almost like a right that the Constitution provides. It's a fundamental right. And despite that, when you say that a 10 years or even longer imprisonment shall be awarded to somebody who refuses to report the accident and takes the blame for it, then it is kind of unconstitutional, and hence this is something that is absolutely under controversy right now. Critics are saying that it is going against the spirit of fundamental rights. So this is one issue that the article highlights. The second amendment that has been drawing attention is section 112. Now this section says that petty organized crime. It defines the concept of small organized crime, which includes crimes such as either an individual or a group of people indulging into things such as chain snatching, jewelry snatching, wallet snatching, any kind of theft or dacoity, any kind of unauthorized selling of tickets, black marketing to be more specific, gambling, selling of a public exam question paper illegally or leaking that paper. So any such criminal act shall be codified under section 112. But the article argues that the definition of petty organized crime as per The new amendment is very, very open-ended. It's very ambiguous. There is no clarity on that. And hence, there is concern about how constitutional it is and what kind of punishments shall be envisaged separately for each of these acts. Will it be a blanket punishment for all these? Whether it's an individual involved or a group of people, and across all these different kind of small crimes, or will it be different for each of these? So that specificity has to be there in the law. The third thing that this article argues against is subsections 6 and subsection 7 of section 143, which deal with certain things such as trafficking offences. Now, subsection 6 talks about trafficking of a child multiple number of times on more than one occasion, while subsection 7 says that when a trafficking of human is being done by or has been tacitly seen involvement of a public servant or a police officer. So both the subsections are dealing with trafficking, but one is about being done by non-public officials, while the other talks about such a trafficking crime being undertaken by somebody who is under government service or under public duty. But the problem with the law is that punishment for both of these is life imprisonment. So there is a similarity of punishment despite the different nature of the crime involved, and hence this is something that has raised issues. It says that there is no proportional justice being done under this law, and therefore the implication is something that will not solve any purpose of sort of improving the existing laws already. Then there is a clause on property theft provisions. It says that whenever there is a kind of property theft, particularly where the property, movable generally, is of a value that is under rupees 5,000, then such a crime may or may not be reported. There is no absolute mandate for such a crime to be reported to the police if the value of the stolen property is less than rupees 5,000. Now, this is something that is not being taken well by the critics and by the people in the law domain. They say that when we allow somebody to get away with a petty crime that is of a value under rupees 5,000, we are in fact abetting crime. We are encouraging more crime. And then in the case where somebody who is genuinely very poor has been robbed of rupees 5,000 worth property, and if they cannot get justice, then we aren't talking about justice at all. So therefore, this kind of situation is creating non-cognizability of a crime that is, whatever you say, a crime still. And therefore, it is something that it is very, very ambiguous as highlighted by the article. And totally, the article argues that until all these three issues are taken care of, the new codified Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita will probably not solve its purpose. And let's also remember that whenever we talk about the new Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, let's remember that it has in fact created many, many changes, such as it has omitted certain crimes that were earlier dealt under IPC. For example, you might be aware about Article 377 that dealt with homosexual relationships. But that was something that was omitted. Now it has been codified under the new law. Similarly, the law regarding punishing adultery, that was something that was omitted. Similarly, the Thugs Act that dealt with 310 segment of IPC was also omitted. In fact, the Sanhita is talking about certain new offences that have been included now. What are these new offences? The new offences range from, for example, a fake promise to marry somebody and then cheat is under the ambit of crime. Similarly, mob lynching, spreading fake propaganda, again, is liable of the nature of crime. Similarly, a very interesting thing that has been propounded by this new law is including community service as a form of punishment. So therefore, it's a very interesting debate really, that while some new interesting things are being added, some are being deleted, but particularly what is grabbing attention is the ambiguities regarding the laws that we just discussed, and that's what the article argues. With that, let's proceed with the next article. This is right page number 1, and the article talks about an initiative by the government which now makes it mandatory to separately record the religion of both parents, father and mother, while we are registering the birth of a newborn under Indian law. What is the relevance of this new initiative, and in general, what purpose will the new digital registration system solve is what the article deals with. So the article is talking about new changes or new initiatives which Indian government today is taking with regards to registration of various vital statistics in India. Now, what are vital statistics, or what is vital data? Vital data is when we need to register birth of a child, death of an individual, in fact, even cases of stillbirth. Sometimes we also here talk about issues such as providing speedy birth certificate, death certificate. All these are included as vital statistics and vital data. The importance is that whether you talk about census operation, whether you talk about linguistic survey, this provides roadmap for better social economic planning. In fact, that is the whole rationale behind civil registration system in India. When we talk about civil registration system, it is that kind of single mechanism under which such vital data that we are talking about, birth, death, stillbirth, they are all recorded on a permanent continual basis for better planning and for better understanding of demographic profile of the country. So the article therefore says that there is a new change which is known as the model rules, which have been drafted by the Union Ministry of Home Affairs, and these are creating some changes or amendments to the existing Registration of Birth and Death Act, which is in fact the RBD Act of 1969. So today we are talking about these changes in the article. Certain changes that the article is talking about are a mandatory recording of parental religion. Before the model rules were put in place, the religion of the family was needed when it came to registering the birth of a child. But now it is not about the family's religion. In fact, there is a separate column that shall be provided regarding notifying mother's religion and father's religion in the recording process. Similarly, this change aims to provide a deeper understanding of India's social demographics, which means a better understanding of religious cultural variations across India, which will eventually enable much better planning, as we are saying. Similarly, there is a digital registration system that is being spoken about. Now, registration of birth and death, the RBD Amendment Act 2023 has mandated that there has to be a digital record or registration of all the birth and deaths that are taking place within the country, and they all will be registered under central government's portal known as Civil Registration System, or the CRS system that we are talking about. Digital birth certificates. Under this new system, birth certificates issued digitally will serve as one single permanent document to prove the date of birth of an individual, and this shall be used for admission across various colleges and educational institutions. Plus, this will also feed into obtaining of other vital documents in the country such as Aadhaar card, passport or voter's ID card. Similarly, there are certain changes that have been envisaged in the proposed registration form. For example, the Registrar General of India has said that the medical certificate which is provided upon the death of an individual will now also clarify the history of illness because of which the death has happened. So already we are providing the reason behind the death, but the new model law says that, or the new model code of rules say that we have to now also specify, the government shall need a specification regarding what was the history of the disease due to which a particular individual has died. Apart from that, there is statistical and legal information that has to be mandatorily provided. What is that information? That information talks about legal information such as Aadhaar card number, mobile number, email, ID of parents. All these shall also be recorded in a more descriptive format when it comes to registering birth information. This will provide more transparency when it comes to registering births in India. Eventually, the idea behind the whole initiative is to prepare a much more sustainable and a more systematic national database. If a national database is created by taking data from the civil registration system, it will help, for example, in providing better justice to the vulnerable segments of society. The government will have a better insight into various religions, various castes and various kind of cultural changes in India such as interfaith, intercaste marriages. It is easier to track down the details of individual if such descriptive and statistical information is provided right at birth. It will also prevent certain kind of you can say crimes where people hide their original birth certificate information and then falsely obtain government identification cards and documents such as the Aadhaar card and the passport. So therefore, they will also enable people to access better ration card, creating more electoral voter I cards. This will also enable better ease for providing admission into higher institutions. Similarly, social economic planning, much better social initiatives could be taken by the government if all detailed, in-depth, qualitative data is available to the government, and that's pretty much the rationale and the logic behind this exercise. Also, the government says that, mandated by the 2023 amendment to the RBD Act, the registrars and the chief registrars will be obliged to share all the data that they have about demography of Indian people into the national database, that is online, under the central government. So what is the use of the data? The use of the data is enabling better use of vital statistics in India, and as we already discussed, this kind of essential demographic and health related information will not only create better medical planning, better medical initiatives, also it will enable much better social economic planning across the country. Now with this we proceed with an article that has been highlighted on page number 14. It belongs to the IR segment, and we are talking about how the US has clarified in a recent meetup with Indian officials that US has no sanction, it has no reservation, no objections really when it comes to India's dependence on Russia for crude oil imports, and US is not planning to implement any sanctions on Indian companies when they are dealing with fuel imports from Russia. So that is the debate point of the article here, and here in the article we shall talk about different positions, different claims, one made by US, the second made by Indian authorities, and the third made by Russian authorities themselves. So as per the US Treasury Department's position, they recently clarified that the intention behind creating any sanction or any, you can say, alert by EU and the US upon various countries including India for discouraging them to inculcate trade ties with Russia or to encourage them for reducing their import dependence regarding crude oil on Russia, the entire purpose was to enable some kind of punishment or punitive action towards Russian authorities. Now we all know the ongoing Russia-Ukraine battle. We understand the impasse between Russia and the NATO nations. So it is coming in the backdrop of the same controversy, and US clearly specifies that the whole aim behind earlier imposed US sanctions was to create some kind of reduction in oil revenues of Russia. The purpose was never to stop countries like India from accessing energy. The purpose was never to discourage countries like India from achieving energy self-sufficiency. So that's what the officials have clearly said, that whatever sanctions the US had been imposing so far were all against shipping companies so that Russian revenues are coming down. The purpose was not to discourage India from accessing Ural oil. That was not the purpose. So therefore, the detailed talks have soothed out the tensions that were happening between India and the US regarding India's huge volume of oil trade with Russia, but still there are certain grey areas in the dialogue that have not been sorted out. So the Indian Ministry of External Affairs has clearly responded to this claim of the US by saying that India's energy needs come first and foremost. Now, a gigantically developing economy like India today has a massive energy need, and therefore India has its own commercial priorities, and therefore India reiterated that depending on Russian oil in no way was a sign that India was pro-Russia, or it was not a sign that India has been pro-Russia when it comes to Russia's stand on the Ukraine issue. The whole purpose was to enable better fuel supply to India and also to create a stability in the world fuel prices. That's something that India has clearly deteriorated once again. To this, Russia also in fact responded by accolading India, by appreciating India, that India was able to maintain an independent stand. And India was able to defend its own economic interests and not get impacted by pressures by the EU nations and US. And today, if you talk about India and Russia, oil dealing relationships, then let's understand that Russia, in fact, is one of the largest oil exporter to India. India, along with other certain countries, depends on Russia for more than 30% of its oil imports, as per the data of 2022. So that is the sheer intensity of the relationship, and Russian oil purchases by US and China have in fact shot a big time in the recent few years. So Russia therefore has appreciated India's independent foreign policy, its commitment to a kind of non-alignment ideology that it has always maintained, that it is purely a commercial decision, and in no way does it show any kind of ideological bent by the Indian authorities. Now, similarly, the article also highlights that as a part of US-led sanctions, including price cap that US had imposed on Russian oil, the whole purpose was to make sure that Russia does not provide any kind of too much discount on those people who were importing oil from Russia and avoiding US and European companies. So Russia has therefore replied by saying that constantly, in the light of discouragement by US on Russian supply of oil by the countries, Russia is sticking to its own oil partners, and the MEA of India clearly says that India's procurements of oil in the international market apologies for the technical glitch here. So this is the controversy that's going on as of now. And the reports say that, however, Indian buyers are absolutely proceeding with their own firm dependence despite the ongoing Western regulations. With that, we proceed with the page number 16 article that talks once again about, we are experiencing a slight technical glitch. Apologies for that. Just give us 2 minutes. Once again, apologies for the slight technical glitch here. Now, the next article we are talking about is page 16, once again IR, and we are talking about the ongoing controversy about the South China Sea. Now, whether it be the China's increasing geopolitical influence in the South China area, where it be the response from certain like-minded countries including India, Australia, Japan, US in the form of Quad. Here we are talking about how Philippines is now ready to hold naval exercises with US, Japan and Australia. The purpose behind the exercise is to create a better integration of like-minded countries against China's expanding influence in the Asia-Pacific region. We shall need 1 more minute. Please cooperate with us. Apologies once again for today. We are trying to fix some technical glitch here. So I was talking about how Philippines is now taking a counter stance against China's aggression by pairing with certain like-minded countries, particularly the Quad countries. The purpose behind the ongoing or the upcoming naval drill is to expand influence of countries like Australia in the South China region. It's coming at a very interesting time when US President is heading towards addressing a trilateral summit between leaders of Philippines, Japan and US. So Australian participation shall also be witnessed. Once again, give me 2 minutes. Apologies once again. So with Australia's participation, it also talks about enhancing military ties between the navies of these respective countries. Now, tensions have recently escalated in the given region because of China's disputed demand over certain islands on which Philippines and Vietnam also make a claim. So now US is actively seeking this initiative with its partners to counter China's impact in this region. Apart from that, there has also been a talk about defense pact that shall happen between Philippines and Japan, in which Both of them will mutually deploy some military in each other's region to safeguard against any future aggression claimed by China. Plus, many trilateral cooperation projects shall also be spoken about. With this, the last article of the day talks from the segment of science, and we are talking about again a 1 minute hold, please. So the last article of the day talks about AMR, antimicrobial resistance. Now, right from 1920s, the article says antibiotics have enabled a better lifespan for people by fighting against certain diseases like tuberculosis, for example, which were earlier associated with high mortality. But as times changed, there was an overuse of antibiotic. Why? One reason was easy availability. In countries like India, due to compulsory licensing, and in fact in many other Asian countries where doctors were easily prescribing antibiotics, even in the animal husbandry sector they were being used very, very rampantly, creating a kind of category of organisms called superbugs, which WHO also says might create a disease X, a disease to which there shall be no more cure. So we are developing kind of bacteria who are now resisting these antibiotics, and hence in case of a simple infection, antibiotic will not work, leading to high cases of fatality. It's a big menace to public health. In fact, last year, there was a very big conference held in UAE, one of its own kinds, which spoke about how to combat the antimicrobial resistance. So a complete change of policy and behavioral practice is needed so that antibiotics can only be reserved for usage in cases where critical need exists. Better monitoring and better surveillance of the issue is important. This is what the article says. The article talks about a project known as Prescriber Today, Steward Tomorrow, under which the next generation of doctors shall be empowered with the knowledge and skill to tackle problems such as antimicrobial resistance. So not only will a pedagogical change be needed in the curriculum of medical study, but also there shall be better regulations where doctors cannot easily prescribe antibiotics unless some kind of compulsory permission is obtained by the governmental authorities. Similarly, how to create a culture of avoiding antibiotics, specifically for non-bacterial diseases, demands a kind of community hygiene and community healthcare system change that can be best implemented only when medical education is overhauled. So today, there are collaborative efforts between NGOs and various institutions that are working towards AMR, how to reduce AMR by educating not even the doctors in fact, but community health workers and including ASHA workers, Anganwadi workers also who deal with women and children health, so that general public practices towards antibiotics is refrained from, and only then can we reduce the possibilities of future upcoming pandemics of diseases caused by germs who do not respond to any known medication. That's what the article talks about. With this, we can have a look at two mains questions. The first one talks about discuss the implications of recently enacted criminal laws under Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023, particularly focusing on deferred implementation of Section 106 Clause 2, which we just spoke about, which gives a 10 years plus imprisonment to people who disappear and refuse to report a case of an accident in case it's a fatal accident, and how it contravenes the constitutional provision of the right against self incrimination, that is Article 20 subclause 3. So that's what we need to talk about. Apart from that, other 3 controversial articles that we just discussed in the article. The second question says elaborate on the key factors, important factors contributing to the burden of antimicrobial resistance in countries like India. So what could be certain factors? Of course, easy availability of drugs, that is patented drugs which are available in a non-patented manner because of compulsory licensing, a lack of curriculum which is sensitive towards avoiding the use of antibiotics, strict laws against antibiotic usage in animal husbandry sector. Now let's remember, many of the antibiotics for human use are also used for as growth promoters in animal and dairy farming sector. So that needs to be combated against. Similarly, we need to talk about implementing better community health and hygiene practice by involving all participants, including community health workers in India, to promote a behavior that is anti the use of antibiotics unless there is a dire need that's there. Similarly, in countries like India, how can we mitigate this crisis? So all these steps can be taken to mitigate the crisis. Ultimately, we need to protect from the bigger threat that is emerging of the disease X, a future unknown pandemic as per WHO, World Health Organization, which could be created by certain category of superbugs who refuse to die in case of any antibiotic. And already, we know that certain such cases are happening. Remember the Kerala case of flesh-eating amoeba and brain-eating bacteria. So all these are you can say, a milestone which just create a necessity of using antibiotics only as emergency medications and therefore creating a future class of medical professionals who are aware about this strategy. So that's what we need to answer here. Now with that, I take your leave for today's segment. See you very soon with other interesting sections. Thank you so much for your cooperation and extremely apologetic for the technical glitches of the day. Thank you and see you.